All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Toucan Milestone release, which is a 2.3 version of ONOS Classic. But as part of that, we'll also provide updates on other long-term support versions and a little bit on micro ONOS update as well. But for the most part, the focus will be on 2.3. This is a public and recorded meeting, so keep that in mind. We pushed this milestone a little bit a couple of weeks because of holidays in the US, but we're still staying on schedule for release on January 24th, and with the feature freeze being right after the new year. I mean, I know effectively it'll be before New Year, but just in case somebody feels like coding features over holidays, that's fine. So, and as a reminder, the major themes for this release were to upgrade all of the long-term support releases to Bazel 1.0, and as well as updating the third-party dependencies for all those long-term supports, to the latest versions. GUI 2 was also slated to achieve feature parity with the old UI based on older versions of Angular, and of course to be able to do various bug fixes. But that's about it. So with that in mind, let's dive to the base and core of the system. Ray or Carmelo, do you guys want to provide an update here?
I would say Carmelo did all the work, so we'll let him have the glory.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ray. I hear a lot of echo of my voice, but try to speak anyway. So I guess you guys, Thomas and Ray, did work to enable Bazel 1.0 on master as well as ONOS 2.2. So, I mean, concerning the Toucan release, that's thanks to you. What I did is essentially cherry pick some of the older changes that were used as the basis to enable using Bazel 1.0, such as updating protobuf and gRPC on ONOS 1.15. And so now also ONOS 1.15 can be built using Bazel 1.0 using JDK8, whether when in 2.2 and master instead we use JDK11. Another important change that went in was revamped support for building external application using Maven. This is something that was supported since the very beginning of ONOS, when the official build system of ONOS was Maven. And so we were publishing a number of artifacts, but as well as abstract POM files that were used as a base by other applications to pull in all the necessary dependencies, both compile time and runtime for applications, as well as Maven plugins to build things like the necessary configuration for ONOS applications. So these files went. I think we stopped maintaining these files with the. We gradually stopped maintaining this file with the move first to Buck and then to Bazel, and the reason is obvious because before all this, for example, the ONOS dependencies POM was maintained by the ONOS core developers themselves, since it was the base of ONOS itself. But since the move to Buck and Bazel, that required manual updates. So every time we were updating a dependency in ONOS using Buck or Bazel dependency management, we had to remember to do the same in the POM file. And clearly this led to a lot of errors. And I think eventually in ONOS 2.1, we decided to remove this POM file. And so what I did, since I started working on upgrading some of the core applications to work with ONOS 2.2 and JDK11, I decided to reinstate that POM file. And now it is called ONOS dependencies, and it's auto-generated from the deps.json file that we have in ONOS, and it's also used by the Bazel build. So this ONOS dependencies POM file is published in the using the regular ONOS release mechanism. It's auto-generated, meaning that there is no risk of having version discrepancies, and it also comes with pre-configure Maven plugins that works well with JDK 11 and the newer OSGI and Karaf. And as a consequence, I also updated the archetypes to use this new ONOS dependencies abstract file.
This is huge because not only it helps some of the import applications, but I think it kind of reinvigorates the ability for developers to start from scratch, because that's atrophied over the last 2 releases, and so now it's back. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I also want to mention the fact that I mean, even if we use Bazel for building ONOS, and that has a lot of benefit, it seems that the most prominent way of like building Java applications out there, it's still using Maven. So I think it's important we keep maintaining that build system for external applications.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, great. So who wants to talk about the auxiliary locations?
I can do. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we did, we introduced this auxiliary location. We had a use case for BNG and SIBA, but basically the auxiliary location allows us to provide additional location different from the one where the host attached to. As I said, we have a use case with the BNG and SIBA where the hosts are actually attached to the OLT, but the OLT somehow have some pass-through rules. So at the end, in the host in ONOS are shown attached to the aggregation switch. But this is not the real location because the hosts are attached to the OLT. Then the second thing that we did with this, we did this optimization, the OpenFlow southbound. So we were offering to the application the capability to build batch, but when we serialized this batch on the wire, we were still treating a single OpenFlow message as independent. So for each OpenFlow messages, for a single OpenFlow message, we were doing a flush of the buffer instead of serializing all the message on the wire and then flushing the buffer. And this has a huge performance implication because, I mean, each time you flush the buffer, you're doing a syscall. Other things that we did, this mainly comes from an issue that we had in production environment. With a huge number of hosts, we found that the single thread executor in the host location provider was not enough. We had huge delay in the host discovery. So we added the multi-thread executor there with host affinity, so we can process in parallel packets coming from different hosts, but we can still ensure the correctness of the update. Then we had this optimization, the link discovery. So right now there is a flag in the LDDP provider where basically you can disable a feature that we use typically. So we use the LDP packet to do discovery, but also to check the liveness of the link. Enabling and disabling this flag, actually you can disable this property of the liveness. So the LDP packets are still used for the discovery, but we use just the device event to mark a link as down. Then I think you can go to the next slide, please. Jordan added a new CLI command to force the snapshot of the wrap partition. Also, this was, I mean, was related to an issue that we had in production. And then there were a couple of other bug fixes that we got in. This write and flash basically is related when we had an idle timeout in the OpenFlow southbound. So we don't hear for a lot of time packets coming from the OpenFlow connection. And this usually can happen on the backup instance, but you don't have a lot of packets going there. So in the past, we were doing just write without flashing the buffer. But when you do this, if you are sending, for example, an echo request to the switch to check if the switch is live or not, this packet, this write can be delayed as soon as the buffer is not full. Then there is, we improved the duplicate DPID detection. So there was a strange race condition. So we were able to detect a duplicate DPID, but we were processing the ports coming from, how to say, the switch configured with the wrong DPID, but this should not happen because we detected that this switch was wrong configured. Why we should process the port status message coming from this switch? Then the third issue, basically Jordan fixed a problem where basically an ONOS instance was not able to rejoin the cluster. And this related to this problem. So we fixed an issue that was causing data loss when there are rough nodes that needs to recover, and they don't have a persistent snapshot, for example, in Kubernetes. And then there was another issue still related to some problem that we had in production, where in some cases, an ONOS instance can mark the other peers as deactivated, but this was not true. This was related to, we were reading the cluster metadata in a critical session, and we should not do that. And this can lead to this wrong marking. That's it.
This is great. Quick question on the consolidated OF messages without the flush. Did we see any bump up in C-bench numbers? Do we know?
I didn't do any test on C-bench, but we did some check on the switch CPU utilization, number of packets that we sent. We can see, for example, in the CPU usage on the switch, a drop from 100% to 60% of usage when we push a lot of flows, like a switch reboot with a huge number of flows that needs to be pushed. And also the number of packets that the switch receive are less. Because, you are consolidating several overflow messages in a single. But, I didn't run any C-bench. We should try and see if
that would be interesting. I would expect a bump up because clearly, both sides are going to benefit from it, as you observed on a switch, but the server side will also benefit from it.
Yeah, exactly, because you're reducing the number of TCP write, basically.
Right, yeah, because you're loading up the bus fuller before you cross from user space to kernel space. Yeah.
Yep.
That's very cool. Nice, good job. Is there any questions on the core and platform thus far? If not, we can move to the next item, which is P4 and Stratum, and I assume Carmelo, you're gonna cover that?
Yeah. So the main new thing concerning P4 and Stratum for Toucan is the addition of a new driver behavior called BNG programmable that it's used for SIBA and the SDBNG use case. Essentially, this driver behavior allows pipeline independent control of the BNG user plane functions that we are working on SIBA. So things like PPA termination, accounting, and etc. It's in purpose similar to the flow objective API and the pipeliner behavior, but we decided to create a specific one because we felt the flow objective API was a bit too ambiguous for the purpose. And yes, the main goal here is to allow independent evolution of the P4 implementation or whatever is the switch implementing to perform the BNG user plane functionality and the applications that provide the control plane functions. And along with that, we also provide an implementation of this driver behavior for Fabric.P4. Then we had a contribution from a student, Yushen Liu from NCTU, which I would say finally added support for supporting handling of default table entries in the P4 runtime driver. This is something that we needed for a long time, but no one found the time to work on that. So before, for example, when we're dealing with things like default routing entries in trellis, we were using also nasty workarounds. So now we can finally support default table entries the right way. So thanks, Yishilian from NCTU for this contribution.
This is great. All right, Andrea.
Yes, thanks, Tom. So in ODTN, there's a few updates that have come along since last time we spoke in form of a release. We added a bit error rate and modulation behaviors thanks to the contribution from Sterlite. They are also ported to many of our drivers. They're OpenConfig based. We also had some implementations for the power configuration, especially the Nokia driver now supports this capability too. And they're not yet merged, but present on Gerrit Infinera driver also has the same. We added more advanced Nokia Lumentum and OpenBroadband to the two drivers for capabilities of controlling many more devices, yet again based on OpenBroadband or OpenConfig, depending on the transponder on the ROADM side. We extended the optical UI with frequency and power, both current input and output, but also capability to set the power. The frequency, both capability to read the existing frequency out of the device and also to set it on the device itself through the UI. We also did some bug fixes and improvements in the alarm subsystem, in the device description and chassis ID, in the UI and in the intent subsystem. Just by using it, we found a few bugs here and there and just fixed it in the master branch. For the release, they're going to be finished by feature freeze of the 3rd of January. We have some programmable consolidation to avoid code duplicacy, GPY integration for an external path computation engine that allows us to have a better optical impairment calculation in terms of loss, amplification needs, power, launch power at every stage, and things like that. We are also going to merge the Checklight ROADM drivers. Those are yet on Gerrit. They were contributed thanks to Jan from Chesnet. So we're going to have yet another ROADM capability. And we're also going to merge the ROADM cross-connect command that enables us to create cross-connection internal to the ROADMs. Something that I forgot to put in here that was discussed lately was also alarm configuration. We might have an OpenConfig alarm behavior in the upcoming weeks, but it's a stretch goal for the January the 3rd feature freeze.
Very nice. Thank you, Andrea. Any questions at this point, Tom? All right. So we can move on to GUI 2. Sean, you want to take this?
Yeah. So there have been a couple of big commits on the build infrastructure for GUI, and there are a couple more to come. I'm waiting for Angular 9 to come out and some extra native targets there for or rules effectively for building Angular. So in terms of functionality and like achieving what it said on the title slide of having parity for GUI 2 as with GUI 1, there's a couple of things need to be done. So for instance, like the pipeconf GUI doesn't exist on GUI 2. There was also an issue raised by somebody in the community that the DNS GUI wasn't working, and also there are other bugs and outlying items. There's items for ODTN that I'm actually working on today, and my understanding of getting that parity is to be able to support people when they need to do demos and tutorials and that kind of thing. So for instance, like with the next gen SDN tutorial with the P4, you know, I want to be able to bring GUI 2 up to the level that that it can be used in that, because I think it's using GUI 1 at the moment. And you know, I'm perfectly open to adding functionality if people need it as well. I added actually new functionality to the alarm view today, and hopefully those kind of improvements will pull and persuade people to use GUI 2 as their default. I don't know what the plan is, Thomas. Do you see GUI 1 being retired at some stage?
I'd love to.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like Ray said, it would be great if he can, but clearly we can't do that until at least we've gone through migrating all of the internal apps, right? So like the DNS or DHCP, I know there's a DHCP app has a UI. I'm not sure whether we migrated that. So there may be a handful of these.
Yes.
Generally, they should follow the same pattern because a lot of them are just tabular views.
And they're pretty easy to port, you know. But it's where there's some topology really is the trickiest one of all. But you know, that's something that's we can pick and choose what we want to bring there if people have a particular need. You know, we can ensure that's there. Sorry, Thomas, I didn't mean to cut across you.
To retire the kind of the base GUI and the framework that it provides will probably, you know, because we'll have to go through a kind of the announcement process where we're gonna give people a heads up.
Right.
And if you feel like we're close enough and would like to start on that kind of kick off that obsolescence process, we could possibly, you know, before the end of this year, we could announce a planned date for discontinuing support for this.
Okay.
At least in terms of clearly, in terms of the leading releases, right? In terms of the 2x.
Yes. Yeah.
Supporting it obviously for however long we're supporting the associated long-term support.
The other thing we could do is we could flip GUI. GUI 2 is not the default currently, right? It is.
It is.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just telling if you could hear. We'd have to check with John because I think they've done a lot of really good custom stuff that they use internally, and we would have to find out what the ramifications are for them.
Right. Okay. So I mean, it's something that I intend focusing on, you know, up until the as much as I can up until the end of the year at least. I think the cutoff point for this Toucan is mid-January. Did you say?
First week.
Yeah,
January
so
3rd.
the feature, kind of the feature freeze, clearly code can still pour in until, you know, but it should not be related to major features. It should be related mostly to stabilizing things and fixing defects. That's the idea. So then we have kind of 3 weeks for stabilization and testing, and so then we can release at the end of January.
Okay, yeah, we'll see how much we can get done in that time frame, and I guess we'll make an evaluation then at the start of January as to whether whether we're ready to send out those messages.
Yeah, and that line is clearly software when it comes to applications which are optionally loadable, right? If they're optionally loadable and they're giving new functionality to the apps without disturbing the old one, might be no problem.
Okay. And does anyone know in a deployment situation like Comcast, is the GUI used at all?
You know, that's a good question. Pierre would probably know the answer. I know that.
I know they use it, but I mean, they are still using an older version of ONOS.
Right.
Right, but it's part of their workflow, Pierre, that they actually do use a GUI.
On the engineering side, right? I don't think the operators themselves use it, right?
I'm not sure, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, well, that would be, I suppose that would be something to watch out for if they are upgrading, and we'll see what we can do to support that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably it for me, I think, Thomas.
Great. Thank you, Sean. All right, what do we have next? Okay, QA. Yuan, do you want to cover that? No new
Yeah.
issues of wow.
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we didn't plan any new tasks for this release for QA. It's just monitor existing tests for bugs, and there's no new issues observed. That's it.
Wow, that's got to be first.
Yeah, geez.
Do you have and how is the performance going in terms of the regressions and stuff like that? No regressions there either.
No regressions. It's been stable.
That's great. Pierre, the changes that you talked about, that's been already merged, I assumed?
Yeah, yeah, it's been merged on Friday, I believe.
Okay.
Oh, so
okay.
it's in master branch also.
Yeah.
Okay. I did not see changes in Cbench results actually.
Okay.
Okay.
It could be that we're limited by something else too, right? Not just the IO loop. It could be that there's other resistance being put up,
Yeah.
so that you loading
but in
up
the Cbench test, we're pushing any flows to the switch.
Are we pushing any? No, I don't.
No.
Yeah.
No
I guess
flow.
that this is why we will not see any improvement, because the packet out are still sent one by one. But this improvement was for the flow mod messages basically, because there you have a batch.
It's on a way inbound. Okay. I was interpreting.
We were
more...
using the batch, but we were taking a single message for each batch and do a write. This was the error, basically.
Got it.
Instead of serializing the entire batch on the wire, because we can do that with Netty, and we were not using that feature.
I see. Okay. I was thinking that the change was done actually more in general on the IO loop rather than on sending specific messages. I understand. Then
we potentially could do that, but we should add an accumulator in the southbound. This way you can accumulate OpenFlow mod, the packet out, and then do a single write. But right now we didn't do that. We can do that in future for sure.
Yeah, I don't. I think I would leave it like you have it, because right now it addresses the issue that you had specifically on lowering the heat produced by the switch.
Yeah. For us was that the main problem. Try to reduce the CPU usage on the switch.
Right. Okay. That answers my question anyway. So I misunderstood the scope of the change. Okay. Well, this is great news. So I assume that you'll let us know in terms of test if something starts turning yellow. But this is great news so far. That's awesome. Thanks, Yuan.
Yeah.
Okay. On a micro ONOS side, and this was probably up to me to update, and I failed to do that. My apologies. But primarily, just to give everybody an update, primarily the focus has been on reaching feature completeness for ONOS config by the end of the year. There's a few other things needed to do that. And Andrea, do you want to talk about the syncing up with the device briefly, at least, just at a high level?
So basically what we can do there is to have the capability to include an initial get and set to the device in one of three forms. We might achieve the first one, which I actually have in a PR, which is almost there. I can see it, it's just a matter of cleaning it up, is a blend mode, where you basically set the initial configuration from ONOS config and retrieve the configuration the device has and save it in ONOS config. And this would basically have the capability to sync the configuration that the two have. We also are thinking of two other modes, a force and a passive. The first one is related to ONOS config enforcing the configuration it has on the device and purging whatever everything else the device has. Well, the passive is actually the opposite way around, where the device is the source of truth of initial configuration that gets loaded into ONOS, overriding whatever it has and purging whatever the device has not. So that's something that's the major feature that we're working on for feature complete, and making sure that the Helm charts work. We also started a process with the group from Cord to make sure that we align our release process to a release process that they have, because they have a much better experience in terms of releasing microservices than we do in terms of the ONOS team. So we'll probably, my hopes is to use next week ONOS TST to discuss that. There's an email thread going around between a selected group of people, and we're trying to compile a proposal for that by next week. That's kind of the two main things.
Yep, and then one more feature that I would like to achieve for achieving the feature completeness would be to do at least lightweight integration of ONOS config with ONOS Classic, so that ONOS config would be relying on ONOS Classic for its topology information about the devices and changes in device availability. It's just a small ONOS Classic app that's being worked on right now to do this. But otherwise, I think we're there in terms of being able to handle HA. Performance-wise, we're not concerned about being able to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. But scale-wise, there may be some optimizations that may be required down the line. But that's something that we plan to tackle next year. Anyway, so there's just a quick blurb about micro-ONOS. I don't think we have any demos for this time, because building with Bazel, but it's the same whether it's what version it is. So I don't think that it makes any sense to talk about that. One thing that I would like to also mention, I plan to kick off a discussions with the TST and some of the stakeholders about changing the release cycle for ONOS Classic from 4 months to 6 months. Clearly, I don't want to make that choice unilaterally. I want to listen to what what other people need and what are the benefits and caveats of that change. But my thinking is that with a slowdown in the rate of new feature introduction, perhaps moving to 6 months releases might be appropriate. But that's not something that we're set on yet, so it's just a discussion to be had. So, did anybody have any questions or anything to add for this milestone? All right, if not, then we can give everybody their 20 remaining minutes back, and we'll chat with you probably around Feature Freeze time. Okay? Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.